Hello, and welcome to the Six Figure Developer Podcast, the podcast where we talk about new and exciting technologies, professional development, clean code, career advancement, and more. I'm John Calloway.
And I'm Clayton Hunt. With us today is Jerome Laban. Jerome is CTO of the open source Uno platform and a 4 times recipient of the Microsoft MVP Award. Welcome, Jerome.
Hello. Hi, John, Clayton.
So, Jerome, how did you get started in the industry?
It's been a while. I started, I think, developing on very small devices, hardware, and things like that. Actually, even before that, I was a demo maker. So it's fiddling with hardware devices and graphic cards and things like that. Everything like 1998, so it dates back. So lots of graphics and 3D effects and things like that. Then moved on to hardware, and then hardware development, software on very specific hardware, and then .NET came on. I think it was in 1999 something, beta versions, and then you moved on and stayed onto .NET for quite a while. Was a teacher in France for a few years. Then moved over to Canada, where I started a few gigs in the middle, and then started at another company in which I started Uno. We're talking about 7 years ago, and it was completely private at the time. And then now working open source on that project, and it's been quite the ride. That's for sure. But very diverse. Doing DevOps and other types of low-level development, Linux, Windows, web dev now as well with WebAssembly. So lots of very diverse things to work on.
And is that your main focus these days? Is Uno, or do you have other stuff that you do?
Well, professionally, the Uno is the main focus. So Uno is all about getting C# and XAML running pretty much everywhere. That's our intent. When we're talking everywhere, we're saying iOS, Android, Mac OS, Linux, Tizen, WebAssembly for the browsers, and probably others if others come to it's a rise up to a point where we have interest from users on GitHub, and it's all open source. I mean, it's a project that's free to use, and we're basically taking any kind of contribution like any open source project that is available.
So what exactly is the Uno platform? Is it just like all of the underlying bits? Is it everything from the kitchen sink? Is it what is it? Why would I choose to use Uno?
So Uno is probably a bit of history about Uno would be of interest to understand why we went that route. The parent company of Uno platform is called Adventive. It's a company that was founded about 11 years ago, and the main jobs of that company were to do development on Silverlight and WPF and many other Windows specific platforms, so C# all the way. And then Microsoft approached us at some point to do some Windows Phone development, which we did for quite a while. So it was called Windows Phone 7 series at the time. So kind of the weird naming of the Windows Phone. And then Windows 8 came on, and Windows 10, and we did all that kind of development. And during the time, what was interesting is that people were saying, "Oh, you've made some good applications for us on Windows, but we also have plans for applications on iOS and Android." And at the time, we're talking about 7-8 years ago. Xamarin with Miguel de Casa were working on MonoTouch and MonoDroid, which later became Xamarin, iOS, Android, and then the company that later got bought by Microsoft. And we started developing on this and make something that said, well, because we have so many developers inside, developers, designers, integrators that know about XAML and C# that comes from Silverlight and let's say the UWP part of XAML. why don't we reuse all this and make sure that we have the same skill sets to use for all the platforms? And that's how Uno came to be. And it it grew and grew and grew. So we started with iOS and Android, and then WebAssembly came along because the Mono team started working on WebAssembly, and that's and then Linux and being open source. That happened during the past few years. But it's all about reusing skills. It's reuse your skills that XAML, C#. Even if you're coming from Silverlight or WPF, even if there are things that will improve in the future, if people have been trying to do UWP development, you can reuse those skills for UWP development and go over to all the other platforms that support that Uno supports.
So is obviously it's made to kind of pair with people who already know Mono and Xamarin. Are you having to do, let's say, custom extra development for Uno platform, or is it a completely separate thing from Xamarin, or is it linked to Xamarin? I guess that's what I'm asking.
Got it. So the one thing to make sure of the wording there is that there's Xamarin and there's Xamarin Forms. So Uno on iOS, Android, and macOS sits on top of Xamarin and not Xamarin Forms. So there's no forms in any way in that sense. So Xamarin Forms is a technology that has its own XAML and is made for developing on iOS, Android, and macOS specifically. There are other targets that are available, but it's mainly the three that are supported. But we're on iOS and Android specifically sitting on top of Xamarin. So the plain bindings, which allows for developing on C# against UIKit and Xamarin and the Android UI SDK and the rest of the platform. So that's what we're using there. For the other platforms, we're taking advantage of what .NET is providing us. So .NET 5 recently. So on iOS, Android, not iOS, Android, the WebAssembly and Linux, we're using .NET 5 underneath to provide the support that's needed to provide the platform. Now, with regards to what we enable for applications to show, there are multiple ways to work. And on iOS and Android, we're providing a way to display. So let's say, for instance, you have a text block to display. That text block is going to take the form of a UI label when running on iOS. It's going to be a text view when running on Android. It's going to be a paragraph element when running on the web. And when running on Linux, is going to be just pixels drawn using Skia. So that's multiple ways to draw depending on the platform. And it has its advantages and I wouldn't say drawbacks, but there's ways to draw there's a way to draw on certain platforms that makes it more efficient or more appealing to a certain set of developers. And drawing by the pixel, for instance, on Linux makes it more interesting for other sets of developers depending on the scenarios. Accessibility, for instance, is one very big point that people have been trying to get working properly. And when you draw everything by the pixel, accessibility is very, very hard to get. So that's why we're keeping multiple back-end ways of drawing things available in Uno.
Okay, and that's so that text control, that's a single control that manages how it renders depending on the platform that you've built for?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, there's a way where basically when you create a piece of XAML that contains a text block, an image, and things like that, we're generating code using Roslyn from that XAML, and that code is basically against the XAML, the code XAML API. So there's a new text block, new image, and things like that. And underneath, at runtime, we're translating that text block to something that the platform and the underlying platform understands. So the text block is going to be rendered to a UI label on iOS, or it's going to be drawn onto pixel surface on Skia, for instance.
Okay. So I know like with like if you were doing everything natively, right? So like you might go into your WPF and I guess blend isn't a thing anymore, but you know, you used to be able to like
Wow.
style your WPF controls
Hmm.
using blend and gradients and change the font size and
Yep.
all kinds of stuff. And then, you know, separately in iOS and Android, I'm sure they have their own customizations that you can do, and certainly the web does. Like if you wanted to use
Hmm.
material design, for
Yes.
example, that not the library, but you know the concepts, I guess.
Hmm.
Is it possible to do those sort of integrations and still just use the single Uno control, or
Yes.
is there? Oh, fantastic!
Yes, yes, and yes. So that's a very good. You know, most people are asking the question. So there's pretty much two kinds. Well, let's say three. So there's three ways of thinking about the UI. The first one is I want to use the controls that the platform provides. So let's say if I'm on iOS, I want when I use a button, I'm going to use pretty much the styling approach that if you know WPF, you can you have lookless controls for which you have a style and then a template of that control, and then the content of that control is going to be something. It can be a video button, it can be gradient button, which is star shaped something. But if you want to do that, then you can't use the platform. So let's say if you're on iOS, you want to use the platform's button, then we have a set of default templates that provide for a button, you know, the platform specific way of drawing things. So if you use that approach, then per control, you're going to be having something like a button that displays like a native iOS button, native Android button, native WebAssembly button, or so HTML button. And then if you're on Skia, that doesn't exist because it's just you know, a pixel-based canvas, so there's no default platform templates. It's going to be the XAML one, but you can choose and use because it's UWP. We've imported all the platform templates, so that means that everything that Microsoft has been developing, whether it's the Windows 8 style or the new Fluent styles, those styles are also available to you as a developer per control. So if you want to have a native button and a Fluent button and a material design button, because we also provide a library that provides that material button across platforms, you can choose all of that. And you can even go further than that. You can change the style at runtime per button. So if you have let's say, binding on a style on that button, you can switch between the two. It's useless, but you can do it.
That's awesome.
So yeah, that's the kind of things that, you know, depending on where you are and the kind of designers or users that you have, especially let's say if you have let's say an application that runs on iOS and you also have an application running on the web, you may want to have because your users are likely to use an iPhone and the web or an Android and the web, but less an iOS and Android. That's not happening that often. But you want to have a visual design that looks the same for those two platforms. And in many respects, it can be difficult to get. So that's what Uno provides. You know, either using pure XAML and you define everything what you want. But if you want also to have your very close to the platform, you can also use the native UI.
I can only imagine the amount of complexity that's involved in making something like that work. Just looking through the GitHub organization for Uno platform, it looks like there's some sample repos and things like that, but it looks
Yes.
like there's a large number of divided repositories just to get all of these bits working in concert.
Yeah, well, the Uno platform itself is just mainly the Uno repo. So the Uno, it's called just Uno platform/Uno. So that one pretty much contains all the things that are needed for Uno to work. There are some dependencies, and the biggest one being the Uno source generator. So it's basically something that we had to implement for ourselves. Not waiting for the C#9 compiler to do it. We actually started developing it in the C#6 timeframe. So it's basically the same source generators that have been added to C#9, but we had that during C#6. So we were able to generate the same kind of code that was using Roslyn. And that's how we're doing all sorts of funky things like taking XAML and compile and generate C# that we were generating and optimizing on the fly. So that's the kind of things that we can do with that. But For the rest, yes, it's pretty much all on the inside of the Uno repository, and that's what I'm doing during my live coding sessions on Twitch. It's all about taking an issue and demystifying the whole solution and the whole repository, so that people just can go and troubleshoot if they want to. Like they just don't get stuck on a very large repo and get lost.
And we're recording this in early to mid January 2021. All of the latest bits, .NET 5 and C# 9, were released in November 2020. Did you get much improvements out of those bits being released? Did you get any speed improvements? Did you get new APIs, new functionality?
Many. So interestingly, so it's in two platforms. iOS, Android, macOS are not benefiting from .NET 5 at this point, unfortunately. This is going to be for the .NET 6 wave with other types of improvements that are going to be in that specific time frame. But for .NET 5 and WebAssembly and Skia, so running on Linux specifically. On WebAssembly, we got pretty much in some cases ×2 performance improvements in terms of runtime execution, so that's pretty good. Tooling that's easier to work with. The fact that there's many APIs that have been added that allow us to make sure that everything is running smoothly. And another thing that's on Linux that's very interesting for to get running on .NET 5 is the fact that ARM devices support has been improved. So performance improvement to running on the Raspberry Pi, and that's one of the things that got us to run is the Windows calculator that was open sourced about 2 years ago now, and we ported that over to iOS and Android. So if you want to have the Windows calculator, you go to Uno calculator on iOS or Android, and you're going to get the same calculator. We took that same code that we ported over from Microsoft and put that on Linux and on a Raspberry Pi. So that's pretty cool to see that with all the .NET 5 updates that they've made, that everything's running pretty nicely there.
I'm going to want MS Paint next.
Yeah, well, that one's not C#, and it's not. That's a good one. People have been asking what else could you do if Microsoft open source something, and there are quite a few things that could happen. But we don't know yet.
Nobody wants MS Paint.
Maybe you want GIMP. I don't know.
Yeah, I use GIMP for Windows and GIMP all over the place. So, and before the show, or before we started recording, we were talking about some of the difficulties in the open source ecosystem.
Yes.
Have you, with a project this size, do you have a lot of support in the community? Do you have a lot of folks chipping in and contributing their own blood, sweat, and tears? Yes, and that's so the interesting thing is that when you say you're new, so that means your project is about 1.5 years ago. So but pretty much when we open sourced it, we just dropped a huge amount of code, and people started looking at that and said, well, you're a month old and you have all this, where were you? How could that be that your project is that big? And so it gets difficult for people to understand the depth of that. So commitment to changing a platform is not something that's easy. And then there's also the fact that in the Microsoft ecosystem, people are expecting Microsoft to provide something. So that leaves, let's say, less air for other projects of bigger size to get people to contribute and trust. So we get sometimes people saying, well, you're not Microsoft, so I can't use your project. I mean, I don't know if you're going to be staying here for the next 5 years, because my project is going to last for 10 years. But people are changing slowly their minds, mostly because Microsoft has been open sourcing most of their stuff that they're working on right now, and it serves us well, because I'm contributing to actually Mono and now .NET for WebAssembly to get the ball running. And if you want something if you want something done, just
do it pretty much. So that's what we're doing for Uno. It's just not about just working for Uno. It's all about going to the source of things when it doesn't work, or if you want something new, then just try doing it by yourself. And the way we're working with the way we're financing the project is basically the Red Hat model. So we're saying to people that come in, well, you're free to use the project, but if you want something fixed, then either do it yourself, or then you can pay us to do it, and basically allow us to prioritize your issues and move up the stack. So that's pretty much the way we're working right now, and it's picking up. So that's pretty good. That means that the developers are taking interest, and we've been here long enough for now that the name is out, and we have to get to the next wave of each development cycle that companies are getting, and choosing Uno to get there. But being open source is not an easy task. You have to deal with many people with different set of skills, and we're learning a lot when people are asking questions and and coming into the project with different experiences, and we're assuming things that may not be right. So we have to adjust constantly the documentation to make sure that people are coming in depending on their background and they can understand what we're doing. So that's pretty interesting.
On the documentation, it's probably my least favorite thing to do. But just curious, is there an idiomatic way to do Uno, like to develop using Uno, or is that kind of still up there? Is it opinionated, or does the documentation have an opinion on how you should use it?
So we're pretty much following what Microsoft is doing. So we're not deviating that much, and choosing our own route. Other projects have done that, and then they're I wouldn't say shot themselves in the foot in some ways, but it's we're basically implementing the API that is coming from Windows, and down to the extent where we use Roslyn to just take the whole API set that WinUI and WinRT are providing, and sticking to that API. So if something's not available there, we're not going to be implementing it. If you want to do it, you can do it because you can reach the underlying platform if you want to. But in terms of adding explicit APIs that Windows is not supporting, if we do that, then we get incompatible with Windows. So we generally don't do that. To start with Uno, basically it's just about either going to Visual Studio and adding the Uno platform add-ins. So if you search in the add-ins for Visual Studio, or you can use the .NET New templates. So you can do that on iOS, on Mac OS, or on Linux. If you do .NET New Uno template, given that you've installed the templates from our getting started, you can just basically go and start with that.
Okay, so if I found guidelines for development with WPF or Xamarin that were from Microsoft, I could apply those basic guidelines to Uno, but just use the Uno controls and what comes with that library.
Yeah, well, so in terms of development, you would do pretty much if you start with the development with the UWP guidelines, so developing on Windows, you can apply that directly with Uno, but you can also use all the development techniques that are coming from Xamarin, not Xamarin Forms, but Xamarin specifically for iOS, Android, and Mac OS. They're going to be the same. Any new feature that comes in with regards to the platform, like they introduced something that's called startup tracing for Android. I mean, because we're relying on Xamarin Android, that feature is available right away. There's nothing that Uno needs to do for that to work completely. It's going to be the same thing when going over to .NET 6, and the new support that the Xamarin team or the .NET folks now are going to be adding to .NET 6. This is going to be available right away.
Okay, awesome. I mean that's good, because it's when you're picking up a new library and you don't know how to use it, it's difficult to figure out how to use it. But being able to use anything that you've already learned along the way, or the wealth of information that's available for developing
Yeah, they're
I'm
using
so
this.
not used to saying the what universal Windows is you. What is it? I'm stuck at WPF. I don't.
It's a universal Windows platform.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. And they're learning about that. They're learning, and it's something that they're UWP in some sense is moving along to something that's with Project Reunion and all things like that, where WinUI, so the UI part of the UI part of Windows is going to get a library that's so the WinUI 3 is going to be separated so that it can run on desktop using Win32. So UWP in some sense is going to be only the container model that sandboxes the applications. It used to be encompassing too much. It encompassed WinRT, which is everything that's non-UI, like geolocator, file access, things like that, and WinUI 1 in some sense, for which it was XAML and everything that had a way to display something. But now those two parts are taken apart, and you can use them as a Win32 app, basically, in pretty much the same way you would do a WPF app in some sense. So that's where we're going, and we're not we're UWP compliant in the API sense of the term for Uno, but we're not bound to the container model, aside from the fact that the platform you may be running on is containerized. So if you're running on iOS, you can do what iOS allows you to do. If you're running on WebAssembly, you can do what the browser lets you do, but that's pretty much it. It's not Uno that's going to be limiting in any way.
Okay.
So what's been your favorite part of the whole process? Are there any big wins that you had? Is it implementing a specific feature or getting onto a specific platform?
Well, getting WebAssembly running, that's a big win. We're taking a look at the outlook of what WebAssembly is providing, being able to run anything anywhere, and being able to interop with anything. That's the big win. You don't limit yourself to one platform. You can go wherever you want to go, given that the browser is letting you do what you want to do. It's still its infancy. There's many things that need to be ironed out, but the fact that much code is able to run in the browser, I mean, it's mind-blowing. And there's so many things that are coming up with regards to supporting browsers, like threading, like being able to interrupt with other languages without any kind of interrupt layer that you need to code by yourself. That's the kind of things that make it, pretty amazing. So you can drop, let's say, I was talking about the calculator before, but if you go to calculator.platform.uno, you're going to get that same calculator running in your browser. So it's the same code with C++ as well that's been compiled over to WebAssembly. So that's pretty amazing for teams that don't want to have to do anything with the stores and the limitations of the stores, and risking your app to be moved away from the store because you've sold anything that shouldn't be sold or things like that. So that's something that I consider a big win, and we're done. We're not done, not by a long shot.
You've lost me. I've got calculator.platform.uno up now.
Yeah, that was amazing. That was amazing. And we've added accessibility support, so voiceover recently, that it's translated into 65 languages as well, because the original one was translated with as many languages. So that's the kind of things that Uno allows to do. So if you push that along with any kind of development that's been done for the past 20 years in .NET, I mean, you get the compiler running inside of the browser because why not? So and people are getting very interesting scenarios running there in the browser just because of that.
So it sounds like there's no lack of features already in Uno, and no lack of features that you're working on adding to Uno.
Oh yeah.
What's coming up? Is there anything that .NET 6 is gonna add that it will allow you to do anything cool?
Yeah. The problem at this point with Xamarin, iOS, Android, and macOS is the fact that, and UWP for that matter, is that you have one one project per platform in Visual Studio, and that makes it, if you create a new project with Uno, you will see that you get a solution with I don't have the count in mind, but I think it's 8 or 9 projects, because of the fact that each individual platform has its own project structure. And .NET 6 is going to enable to have all those platforms just be in one project, and have Visual Studio just select the platforms that you want to develop for, and not have all those duplicates, things that are needed somehow, but don't need to surface that much to the user. So that's the kind of things that are going to be very interesting. Another one is Catalyst, the fact that you can run an iOS application on macOS. And Frank Krueger has done his magic again. He took the Catalyst stuff and the iOS stuff that's coming from, well, actually, the iOS runtime from Microsoft, and just pushed in everything that makes Catalyst run. And you can basically take a NuGet package and make it run on macOS without doing anything else than just linking that NuGet package. So and Uno works with it, so that's pretty sweet. So I'm assuming that Microsoft is going to pick that up, that pace, and get Catalyst running as well. So all the .NET 6 with all the WebAssembly updates that are coming up this year, and and with WinUI 3 as well, we're taking all those investment that Microsoft are doing in WinUI 2.5 and 3, we're porting them over to Uno, so that we're adding many controls per month just because of that. So that's pretty sweet. Yeah, we have lots of work to do for this year, that's for sure.
Certainly seems like it.
And it looks like you've got plenty of open issues on GitHub.
Yes.
You've got plenty of opportunities for folks to get involved in the community.
Exactly.
Are there other resources that you might mention on show that we can point people towards, or just go to GitHub and pick up an issue and
well, there's that. Sure, yeah, there's that. Going to GitHub and pick up an issue could be that. Or what people generally tend to do is that they have their own app, their own scenarios, and they say, well, I want to do this, but Uno doesn't provide it, then I'm going to implement it. So that's what happened with many of the developers that came in. I want to have, for instance, access to through WebAssembly to the support for getting access to the file system, because Chrome is supporting it now. So that's what developers did, and that's pretty much what happens most of the time. But if you want to you get acquainted with Uno, you're going to also go to our YouTube channel. I'm so doing live coding the Uno platform, and if people are want to ask questions, there's the Discord that's available on the it's the UWP Discord. So we have the link on our website, but we have Stack Overflow. We're also present on Stack Overflow and Twitter, and so yeah, lots of opportunities to drill into. But most of the time, yeah, it's just do your app, and if you find something that doesn't work for you, try it.
All right. So as we wrap up, what has been helpful in your career that you might share with those just getting started or those looking to level up their own careers?
Oh, that's a pretty good question. I'd say, open up to other platforms, other developers as well. It's pretty important to not just get stuck to one environment. Even if Uno is all about getting access to other platforms, and people are not just going to be developing for just one Windows, or they're coming to other. The market moves quite a bit. So next thing iOS and Android may just get overruled by something else. That you have to know about all the other platforms, and that's what I did. The Linux investment that I made 15 years ago are serving me now. So it's the kind of things that try new things, get to new, go to the open source project of your choice that you're depending on, because you have to, I work with out of necessity for some projects. I want to do something, then I drill into that project and try to understand what happens there. And when I started, open source wasn't there 20 years ago, or it was not that much. So many things were closed source and you have to guess around, but now it's all open source. So just go and drill into things and get to understand what's happening under the hood. That's one of the good things that can happen right now, and it's mind opening in many ways.
Yeah, it certainly seems like the rate of new is increasing as time goes on.
Yes.
That or I'm just getting dumber and slowing down. But
No. There's way too much stuff to track. That's for sure. That's for sure. That's for sure. It's getting difficult to track everything that's been happening. I mean, the .NET ecosystem is moving, a lot less faster than the other ecosystems, especially with regards to JavaScript and others, where there are many things that are happening a few times a month. But that's why we're trying to narrow down a little bit the field, because of the fact that we're supporting one API set for all those platforms. But the other platforms are still there, so we're not hiding them. So you have to learn about all those different things that are provided there by those platforms. So because the users are still there and they want to use their devices fully. So, but no one's getting dumber or anything. It's just it's imposter syndrome in many ways. It's just coming up every time. But yeah, it's difficult to go around.
All right. Where can our listeners go to follow you and keep up with what you're working on?
So definitely you can follow me on GitHub. So GitHub, say that's Jerome Laban on GitHub. You have Twitter, JLABAN. I'm also on Twitch, Jerome Laban, same thing. And then Discord, I'm present all the time. So you can just reach me there and ask questions. I'll be more than happy to answer.
All right. And chat, just hang out for a few minutes. We'll wrap up the show here and stop our recordings locally, and then we will re-enable the drop game and continue the conversation for a few more minutes. So with that, well, thank you, Jerome. We really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you.
That was Jerome Laban. Jerome is CTO of the open source Uno platform and a 4-time recipient of the Microsoft MVP Award.
if you like this episode, please like, rate, and review on iTunes.
Find show notes, blog posts, and more at sixfiguredev.com.
And catch us live each week on Twitch, and be sure to follow us on Twitter at sixfiguredev.
This has been another episode of the Six Figure Developer Podcast, helping others reach their potential. I am John Calloway.
And I'm Clayton Hunt. Fade down. Everything's quiet. Okay. Stopping that recording. Stopping that recording because John wants me to. Although I'd like to send John like a 5 gig video recording of Zoom, but
wouldn't be the first time.
He doesn't like it.
Yeah, so Clayton records or gets the Zencaster in the Zoom, and then uploads it through Dropbox, and then I download it locally on my machine, and
Nice.
then I take that raw and the edited, and then back it up to my FreeNAS server, and then nightly that folder is backed up to Azure. So like we've got so many copies of this stuff. Great.
Well, that's good. That's good. It's yeah, you don't want to lose all this. It's important. It's still uploading the data, but it's supposed to be finishing pretty soon.
Yeah, you're almost done. John's at 60%.
Yeah, how is the internet?
All done. It's pretty good. I got 100 megabits and down and 30 megabits up, so that's pretty good. That's good enough for me, at least.
I keep increasing it, but my streaming video services still freeze up and tell me I don't have enough bandwidth. I don't know what the deal is.
Oh, Could be local. It may sometimes it's just the router stuff that you have in between that may have issues.
Yeah, you've got the cable modem router from
Yeah,
the company,
yeah.
right?
I guess there
I
was
dropped all this.
there was a thing that passed recently, or our contractor. I don't know what the deal is. My wife told me that we could replace it now. So I might have to ask you what your beast of a router is. Although that doesn't seem to have helped you very much.
Well, that's just because I have lousy internet. But like inside the house, it's fast.
Yeah. Well, I'm on my local network. I pretty much the modem is passed through to cable, so it really doesn't do anything. You get to, and the rest is a PF Sense. So I'm just having that in front of the rest, and it's going pretty fast. It's doing well.
Yeah, I've got the Ubiquity Dream Machine, the cylinder one.
Yeah, that works pretty well as well.
So, how many platforms do you actually have to program in for Uno? Like, is there code for every one of those platforms, or are you leaning like real heavy on Xamarin for a lot of it?
Well, if it's Uno itself, most of the time, depending on the type of control, it can be, let's say when we import control from WinUI, most of the time we don't have to do anything per platform. So let's say we imported, for instance, the control that's called the info bar. So it's a small control that just pops up something with some text in it, and we just basically import it once, and then there's nothing specific per platform. But there are some other controls that when we're developing inside of Uno, that need to have specific implementation because maybe sometimes the platform does not support it, or because we don't have the support for a specific feature that UWP or WinUI is providing. So that's the kind of things that we tend to drop some layers to get to the APIs that we need. But when you're developing an application that uses Uno, most of the time you just need to do it once. You don't need to go down to the weeds and go to the platforms. Now, depending on what you use, let's say you want to do in-app purchases. That is something that is very specific per platform. So we have not implemented the in-app purchases APIs that come from WinRT to get those cross-plat, because those are pretty platform specific in many respects. So that's where you need to do something specific for the platform and code against the native APIs. But that's pretty much where it goes. And of course, if you want to show something that's precisely for the platform, and you want to do, let's say, native button or native combo box or whatnot. So,
I appreciate the Visual Studio templates as well, because I am a Visual Studio user through and through. I'm not good at CLIs. There you go.
Yeah, no, I clicked the wrong button. Sorry.
He's like, I'm out.
But I came across a Channel 9 video where they were showing off the template. So I'll put that in chat. So that was I really appreciate that.
Yeah, it was kind of fun. It was kind of fun to get that rolling. And we're not finished. I mean, we're looking at having something like Visual Studio Code support more advanced in many respects. We're not, because we have to have more integration, especially with regards to XAML. We're not done. So we're relying on Visual Studio for better or worse for now, and many of the updates many of the bugs that people are reporting to us are actually coming from Visual Studio itself. So we're getting to we're trying to get those fixed and provide all the details that we can to the Microsoft teams that are responsible for some of the things that are not working. It's improving. We're waiting for Visual Studio 16.9 Preview 3 very eagerly, let's say. But that's that.
Yeah, the Visual Studio updates are so frequent these days. I'm just like, every time I open Visual Studio, it's like, you have an update waiting.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's been like forever since we had a full version.
Yes. I mean, 2019 is so 3 years ago.
right?
4, 5, 6 years ago. I don't know.
Yesterday felt like 3 years.
But the interesting part there is, I'm working. I have 3 Visual Studio instances installed on my machine, and because if I were to only have 1 or 2, let's say 1 preview, 1 stable, it would be a problem because previews tend to break, and that's a good thing in many ways. But the problem is that it's very, very hard to go back 1 version. Down to a point where if you don't know what you're doing, you can't do it. There's no public way of doing so. So what I'm doing is I have 2 versions of Visual Studio installed of the preview. I'm using a feature that allows you to name a version of Visual Studio, and so what I'm doing is I'm doing a ping pong of updates from 1 version to the other. So I have let's say I have a preview 1 installed, and preview 3 comes up. Then I update my preview. No, let's say a preview 1 and preview 2 installed, and preview 3 comes out. And if preview 1 was fine, I'm updating my preview 2. And if preview 2 was good, I update my preview 1. So I can keep developing without being blocked. If 1 version doesn't work, then just let it be and test if there are other things that may break.
Right. So one thing that we didn't talk about, or I don't remember us talking about it, which has been known to happen. I do forget things quick. But there's a playground that you can do Uno in the browser live without downloading anything. So
exactly,
that is awesome for someone who just wants to what is this thing?
Exactly. So yeah, the playground is all about just drop your XAML and put your data context. And you have a tab that's called the data, and then you can data bind stuff from the view down to the JSON that's provided and the code behind. So that's how you can work with those 2. So you can pretty much test anything that we are providing already, and exercise your XAML skills, and you can even share the XAML and data and JSON that you inputted in the site at the time, and just have that to someone else so that they can test out. And we're getting reports. You're getting bug reports that way now.
Nice.
With people just creating that. So we're considering doing the same thing with C# integrated. So you could probably develop your C# and just compile everything in the browser and run everything through that. And we're not there yet, but it's pretty close.
I do see one problem though. On the on the snippets tab, there's no calculator. That's right. Well,
You got to have that open in a different window.
Yeah, just another window. But yeah, it's the calculator is still it still takes that's one problem of WebAssembly. You still have to compile everything down to an application. So for now, let's say for instance, the calculator is about it's 40 megabytes in compressed. So that's something that needs to be improving on the Microsoft side. So we're working with them to give them everything that the experience that we have with making larger applications using .NET in the browser, so that there are specific scenarios that they can improve on. So to get there. So if we were to integrate the calculator inside the playground, it would make it quite big.
Yeah.
So. But the actual calculator, they're a simpler calculator that you can do in a simple class that would do, but that one is pretty large.
Yeah, well, with all the the scientific and programmer functions and all this stuff.
Exactly.
That is a cool demo though, being able to see the Windows calculator chilling in the browser.
Yeah, it's quite fun. It's quite fun. You can install it as a PWA if you want. So when you open it, there's a plus button that happens at the top. So you can basically install that and run it as a kind of a PWA. So it looks like an app that you installed on your machine, but it's really a website.
It's been so long, I don't know what the M+, the M-, the MS,
that's memory.
The CE, the C, and the
clear
and
clear everything.
I got now.
Go to the programmer calculator. It'll feel like home.
No.
Exactly. Interestingly, because the calculator is the same as the Windows one, the fact that we ported everything as is. So the standard calculator is pretty much the same that you would buy as a cheap calculator. So there's no operator precedence. So people are opening issues and saying, well, if I do that plus and then multiply afterwards, then it does funky stuff. But it's on purpose. So we can't change anything. So you have to go to the scientific mode, and then you're gonna get your the right way of calculating, but with the precedence.
Faithfully copied from original.
Exactly. Exactly. It's pretty old code base. If your parts of that app are as old as 1993, I think.
Wow.
If I remember correctly. So we didn't port everything over to C#. Parts of it is staying in C++. But yeah, it's quite old.
So it's like this. Maybe the Windows calculator does this too. I mean, it very well could. I just don't see it. But when I switch between like standard and scientific, for example, there's like the actual calculation pad, is what I'm going to call it, starts off a little small and then grows. Is that?
Yeah. They removed it, actually. I think. Let me check again. I think they removed it.
But it was in there.
Yeah,
oh no, it does it. It does it. It's a little bit.
So it depends if you're using RDP or anything like that. It depends on your machine's animation settings. So it's supposed to just come in and zoom in. If you install the same application, the Uno calculator on your iOS and Android devices, you're going to get the same animations. Interestingly, on the iOS side, because the calculator has been developed to run on phones and large devices and things like that, it's responsive. And we've enabled the ability for the Uno calculator to be snapped on the side on iPads. So you can basically put your calculator on the side, and for some reason iOS, well, it's not iOS, it's iPadOS now, doesn't have a calculator installed by default. So so you have to get one, and the Uno calculator fills that gap pretty well.
Well, they're not for actually doing things. They're just
well, that's not what they're saying. They're saying
yeah. No, the Pro is for doing things. That's why it comes with a pencil.
Yeah.
See, that's why I got my mother a Surface Go and a pencil.
Right.
You mean a pen?
Pen. I don't know, whatever it was.
The Surface comes with a pen with an eraser.
Okay.
The iPad comes with a pencil with no eraser.
Oh, you can't do? I didn't think.
They may have added it, but when it first came out, it didn't have an eraser. Whereas so that you had the Surface Pen that had an eraser and the Apple Pencil with no eraser. It just, nothing made any sense.
What a world we live in.
Definitely.
Yeah, I'm looking at the Uno gallery, the code samples, and the showcases. What's your favorite one out here? I mean, we're not recording anymore, so it's perfectly safe.
It'll only be kept on Twitch for 14 days.
And then we're going to back it up to YouTube. It's fine.
Well, the calculator is something that we use as a baseline for many things. For supported features, kind of an application that's large enough. Because it gives us the ability to test most of the things that have been implemented in a large, complex application, performance-wise and anything else. So there's that one. There's a channel line application that's educative. People have been looking at that one to understand kind of more larger application, but not too much. There's the Uno gallery as well that shows off the everything goes with material design guidelines and Fluent guidelines. What else? There's community toolkit support. So that one is people have been asking for support for that one for quite a while. So we've ported over the data grid control that's in the WCT, the Windows Community Toolkit. The data grid is something that many business users and a line of business app have been asking for, and that control is starting to be pretty efficient at displaying things. What else? Skia is interesting. Skia Sharp. So it's a demo that shows what Skia Sharp is able to do on the browser. It's basically you can get all the applications that have been using Skia to render things on iOS, Android, and Windows now can do the same on the web. And we have customers that are using it in pretty interesting ways. Having a very small canvas to draw many things on the screen, just because of that. So it's the actual Skia engine running inside of WebAssembly. So if you think about it, Chrome is using Skia to draw itself. And then we're using Skia, the full Skia engine, to render thing inside of Skia. So that's pretty interesting. And the one that I think is actually more mind blowing for me is it's a tech soup, but it's if you go to the GitHub, there's in Uno platform, there's one that's called SQLite and Entity Framework. So on the main page, if you search for SQLite, there's an app that's called SQLite plus Entity Framework Core.
That's one of Frank's, right?
No, not that one. So, Frank's been doing the SQLite mapping to allow for developers to use just a plain simple C# API. But there's another one that's actually underneath the API that's provided by Eric Sink, and that API is the one that's used by Entity Framework. And that demo is about getting C# compiled inside of the browser. And that code is compiled and uses SQLite and uses Entity Framework to manipulate a SQLite database. Everything local inside of one page. And what's mind blowing for me is, a compiler is pretty complex a piece of technology, and it runs in the browser untouched. So that's quite amazing. And then afterwards, that code is using. It generated in memory, and it's using a database that's inside of the browser itself. So, it goes a long way in showing complex pieces of code can run in the browser using .NET, and not just your simple library of manipulating things. It's just complex stuff, very complex stuff.
Is that SQLite efcore-wasm.platform?
Yes, that's that one. When you click the button, you can just you can pretty much, if you have a piece of code, you can just drop it inside that code area and just get it running, inside of the browser.
Just a little crazy.
Just a little. That appeals to developers for sure. It's something that marketing wise is not super sexy. But if you're looking at that with from a developer standpoint, knowing what all of this does, it's mind blowing.
I just love that .NET is really the first programming platform to break through into WebAssembly. They did the Emscriptum and they had a few really cool demos like the Unreal Engine and whatnot, but that never went anywhere that your average developer would do anything with. But with Uno and this and Blazor,
yes,
none of the other mainstream platforms are anywhere close from what I've seen.
Well, the thing is that's pretty much because of the way the platform is providing the the original way of marketing WebAssembly was pretty much about make your JavaScript better. That's pretty much how it was marketed. So because it's the web, that means that people outside of the web are saying, well, that's for the web, so I'm not doing any web, so why should I care? And people in the web are saying, well, I have JavaScript, so why should I care about WebAssembly and running anything else that comes from another language? I have everything that I need. You're pretty close. Except that it's not true. When you're in JavaScript, well, if you want to use FFmpeg or any library that's been developed in C for a while, translating that to JavaScript is not an easy feat. And if you're, in the native world, translating anything to JavaScript to get your application running there, you don't want to, and then you're stuck into using even if they're awesome in their own way, things like Vue or React or others, it may not appeal to everyone, and that means that WebAssembly is pretty much stuck in the mind share of current developers saying, well, if I'm on the web, I'm just going to do very small libraries that are performant to enhance my WebAssembly application. So, it stays in the realm of fancy demos or crypto mining.
Yeah. Just drop this WebAssembly on your website, and everybody that visits your website will crypto mine for you.
Yeah, and that got the wrong press, press coverage because of that, and that's why we're pushing in the direction of making larger application, even if in some cases it's slower than it should be. Because of reasons, technical reasons that are there, but that we know are going to get fixed in many ways in the coming month or years. So that's why we're pushing and get everything running. So in many sense, you're right. With Blazor and .NET, that's what pushes WebAssembly up front for the .NET ecosystem. But it's not going as far for now. With the other platforms, lots of Rust.
Yeah, Rust seems to be the closest one. Yeah. But I knew that they had been working on that, and when I first looked at it, it was nowhere near what Blazor was at the time. And now I'm on there. I went to the Rust website and they had a WebAssembly thing. And you click on I want to learn more about Rust and WebAssembly, and it was just 4 paragraphs of why it would be cool, but not any actual code examples.
Exactly. Yeah.
So now I'm at a tutorial site looking at how to create a web app with Rust, and I'm hoping to get to the payoff.
So they just somewhere need somebody to help out with documentation and code samples.
Yeah, well, and Rust is a pretty cool language. I like that it's super low level like C++ or C, but you have packages like Node or .NET or Ruby or whatever. But it's still fairly niche as far as languages go.
It's moving a lot with systems programming and very low level libraries. Parts of Firefox have been converted over to that because of memory safety in many respects. So that's where it's getting its traction. And for WebAssembly, it's pretty much the same thing. It's just we're still talking about pieces of code that's made to go faster that are ported over to WebAssembly and enhance JavaScript applications. So we're not talking about larger applications. But it's going to move. It's going to move. I'm pretty confident about that.
Yeah, I'm actually waiting for brand new platforms to show up that were designed with WebAssembly in mind. Right. like here's a brand new programming language that compiles to WebAssembly, that does all these things that we really want for the web that JavaScript wasn't helping us out with. I love that C# has ported over to WebAssembly, but I'm waiting for that explosion. I'm a couple of years ago, I predicted, this explosion of new languages and new platforms built using WebAssembly as their main outlet. Still waiting for that. It's going to happen. You give developers a new toy and they're going to do weird stuff with it.
Yeah. It's all about trying it out and see what kind of scenarios fit for your business. That's what it is, and it goes along with you have your application, and it's like when contributing to Uno, when you're asking for how to contribute to Uno, it's just try it, and if you see a gap, try it for yourself.
Yeah, try the crazy thing that you need that no one else needs, and then when it doesn't work.
Exactly, and so
Yeah, freaking Ward says hashtag developers, hashtag weird stuff.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Now I'm caught up looking for example. I just want a single
Rust
WebAssembly example.
WebAssembly example.
I found some code, but they had like, here's pictures of it working. And like, why not just link to a site where the thing is running? Like,
yeah, I think that's where it seems that a lot of the newer projects, and I say newer completely being relative, are standing apart in that they understand that documentation and easy to read code samples and things like that are a good place to get started, are almost a requirement to get some kind of community adoption and then get some excitement around that. And I really appreciate that because it makes it so much better. Because man, when you're trying to pick something up, you don't even know where to start, and their documentation isn't up to snuff because they're probably busy working on functionality.
Of course.
Which I understand, but it's so very much appreciated.
I mean, so I don't know how I feel about it. Yes, I like that it makes it easier to learn stuff and pick stuff up, but at the same time, like, the thing that drew me to programming when I was young was that normal people couldn't do it. Like, it was a certain level of inaccessibility, like, I bought this book, I paid $100 for this book, and none of the code samples work, and I had to figure out how to get them all to work, and that made me feel special, which, like, you'd like, yes, I did it, I got that code sample to work that wasn't working in the book.
Hashtag Clayton is not normal. Got it.
But like, like now it's almost to the point where people are choosing libraries or choosing languages or platforms or whatever you want to call it, because it looks pretty. Like, I'm gonna shop at this website because they have a nicer UI than that website, and it's the same thing for like your programming. Like, well, this one has really excellent documentation, and that one's documentation is terrible. I'm going to go with the one with nice documentation, even though the other one is actually better.
It's commodity, yeah.
I appreciate the good documentation. I appreciate the fit and finish of a well-polished website. Looking at like rockauto.com, the car parts superstore online thing that hasn't changed since 1991, it's got awful ugly, but I bet they're rolling in the dough because they haven't had to touch it in 30 years.
They've still got people employed, like doing background maintenance and stuff, but I don't know. I guess I don't like that the UI is becoming so important because I'm so bad at it.
Well,
I'm not a designer, so anything I make is going to look terrible.
I'm not either. That's why I have there's a team at Uno that does that kind of things.
And here are all the code samples on how to use Material Design and Fluent Design, so it's great.
Material makes my head hurt.
Well, that's what you just use Fluent then.
Yeah. Fluent works.
So you say Fluent, I think like blah, blah, dot, blah, blah, dot, blah, blah.
Yeah, no, it's the Microsoft T.
Oh, that's the, it used to be the, it used to have
Metro?
a different name. Not, is it
Did
Metro?
it have a different name? No, Metro was the boxes.
Metro was the boxes, yes.
Fluent is it? It's not the new version of the Fabric, is it?
Yeah, it's close. Yeah, it's close. It's Fluent is there's visual design, but there's also interactions and kind of visual interaction in the UX. So it kind of encompasses many things. But as a developer, most of the time it's all about just use your use the controls that I've been providing and use a styling guide. So it's use the controls that are fit to use, fit to provide the fluent design guidelines. So most of the time you don't have to invent anything. Now, if you have a larger application, then you may want to look at how the design guidelines may help you to have a better application. And if you're inventing new control, then you may want to read up a bit more. But
okay, so they've got guidelines, but they also have here is a CSS library to use.
Yes.
So that I'm fine with. Material design is like, here is some mystical information that, like you should really think about your website or your Android app in this way, and these things should float above those things. It's all hand wavy and nothing concrete. I mean, I'm sure if you read the whole thing and you understood what in the world it was talking about, that it would feel pretty concrete. But there's no like I.
I understand what you mean, and that's why for Uno we're providing that library that says you can use it that way, but you still have to understand the guidelines. That's why UX designers and designers are graphic designers know about that. They know how to integrate all this properly and make your application do properly. So as a developer, it's a bit more difficult to grasp. That's for sure.
And we appreciate them for it.
Yeah. No, anybody that wants to do the design for me, I'm totally happy.
There you go. Well,
we're pretty far past the hour. Appreciate you hanging out with us and coming on the podcast. We are looking. We kind of ran out of our backlog over the holidays, so we are 1 week away from releasing, unless you've got something specific you'd like us to coordinate the release with.
Not at this point, but
okay. Then we'll look at cleaning up the audio, and we'll release that this coming Monday or a week from today. With
excellent.
That, thanks again. Really do appreciate you coming on the show. With that, we'll say good night, chat. Good night, everyone there. Do join us. Clayton and I run the stpete.net meetup. We will be back on tomorrow night on the stpete.net meetup channel, hosting a Blazor authentication and authorization workshop or presentation. So hope to see everyone there. And then on Wednesday, we may or may not be here for a live coding at 8 p.m. Eastern, and we'll chat about that offline. So, and then back again on the following Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern. Hope to have you there. See you there. We will do the Twitch thing, and we will raid our friend over at Mastermindio something. So thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.
And I'll wait till we're rated it.
Your audio is still going up.
Your audio is still going.